Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to Relentless Learning. I'm Larry Apke. I'm your host. We do this most Fridays at noon Pacific. I'm glad that you were able to join us today. Very excited about today's show. I have a very special guest today. Clement Kao is going to join us. What we do is during Relentless Learning, we talk about two big ideas. The two big ideas this week is Clement is going to talk about empathy ignites success. When we champion our customers' success, they will champion ours. Really looking forward to that. Before that happens, I'm going to present a little bit on a very, very short introduction to the theory of constraints. I think it's really, hopefully helpful for people to understand theory of constraints, and it's certainly something that we pay attention to in the world of product. This Relentless Learning is sponsored by something called the VUCA MBA. And I want to talk just briefly about that. If you're not familiar with the term VUCA, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It is basically a description of the world today as we see it. And it's something that if we look all around us, things like artificial intelligence, et cetera, we see that the world becomes more and more VUCA over time. And the MBA part of the VUCA MBA stands for Mindset for Business Agility. If we have a mindset for business agility, it will help us not only to survive in the VUCA world, but also to help us thrive in the VUCA world. And that's kind of my mission. I now bill myself as a VUCA consultant. For those of you who have not joined us before, welcome to the show. One of the things that I've done in the past, and it's been fairly impactful to the viewers and listeners of the show, is provide my latest book for free. There's a QR code up on your screen. You can use that QR code. All you need to do is put in your name and email. We'll send you a free digital copy of Apke's Golden Rule of Agile, a focus on value delivery. I think it's a good book for product managers, project managers, scrum masters, agile coaches, etc. I want that to be out there, so we've made it available for free. You don't have to worry I'm going to spam you. I might send some reminders of Relentless Learning and the things that we're going to cover for those of you who are interested. So I encourage you all to take advantage of that. And the other thing that I want to talk about just briefly before I get into my big idea is within the comments section, and we welcome questions and comments in the comments section. You've probably seen that some folks have done it as well. If you have any comments, questions or comments, put them in the comments section. We'll address those at some point in time, maybe after the presentations today, maybe during, I don't know. But I've also put in the comments before we started the show some links. And I think these links are helpful. If you're interested in this thing that I call the VUCA MBA, there's a website that I put together. There's obviously a mailing list. You've got my email address. I encourage people. I'm very passionate about this concept of agility. I've taken a lot of my materials and I put them up on YouTube for free. So I encourage folks to check that out. If you're not linked into me already, I encourage you to link into me on LinkedIn. And if you want to just spend some time hanging out and talking, you can get on my calendar and we'll do a Zoom meetup. So all that information is there. And I want to make sure people are aware of that. Today, what I want to really talk about is I want to talk about something called the theory of constraints. And want to show you, one is a short animation, which I think is great, on theory of constraints, and talk just briefly about it and why this is really important. When we talk about the concept of big ideas here on the show, we're talking about those aha moments that we have found in our lives, the things that we've done, that we've seen, that have helped us to understand things that we may not have understood before. And one of these is theory of constraints. So what I want to do, I'll make this a little bit bigger, is I want to share with you a video that I share in my class, my VUCA MBA class, about theory of constraints. And it comes to us from, I believe it is the Theory of Constraints Consortium or Council of Australia. Not 100% sure. I got this animation many years ago, and I thought, whoever it is, I want to give them credit as much as possible because I think they did a great job of showing us visually what theory of constraints is all about. It's a very simple thing, actually. But I want to play the animation because I think it's very helpful to us to take a look at it. Now, what we're trying to concentrate is the throughput of things through the system. And we have 5 different stations where they're doing some work. Each one of these stations has a different capacity, and that capacity is shown below the station itself. And as they're moving these widgets through the system, I want you to notice certain things. First, the lowest or slowest part of the system is station number 3, which can crank out 10 of whatever these widgets are. And at the end of each day, the throughput is equivalent to station number 3, which in this case is, we're going to refer to as a constraint. And you can see that this person in station number 3 is becoming quite overworked and a little bit red in the face. And this is just the last, they're going to show 5 days. So this is the last day. So the throughput for the 5 days was equivalent to what could be done at the constraint. And the key being here, and I want to zone in on what this particular definition of theory of constraints is. Theory of constraints says any system can produce only as much as its critically constrained resource. Were it not so, the output of the system would tend to infinity or 0. Now, this seems to be pretty simple to understand, but the real question is, how do we put this into practice? And why is it important for something like agility or the VUCA world? And the answer is this. Every system, your company is a system. And if you haven't viewed it that way, it's, I encourage folks to do so. And in your system, you will have a constraint or a series of constraints. So if we go back to this particular one, you can see that that our constraint is 10. And the interesting thing about this theory of constraints is, let's say we put in a process of improvement. And that process of improvement was directed to the entire organization. What's going to happen is that, let's say that for whatever reason, we don't make any change to station number 3, but we double the throughput or the output of stations 1, 2, 4, and 5. The question becomes, what is the throughput of the entire system? And the answer is it's still 10. And we need to pay attention to that, because in my practice in agility, if we had 5 different teams instead of 5 different individuals who were necessary to move work from one place to the other, which team do I concentrate on? We tend to concentrate in agile transformations as we try to transform the entire company without looking at the system and saying, where within the system does it make most sense, not only to start, but to put our effort. So I realize, and some of you may point this out in the comments, that this is quite simplistic. And what we do is obviously going to be more complex than this. But we do need to understand it in its simplicity, because it is still something that will affect the systems we work in. And this is what I've seen, by the way, in a lot of agile transformations. Instead of trying to concentrate on the areas where doing intense work is going to produce the most throughput in the system, or the largest bang for your buck, if you want to go with that term, we concentrate more in a scattergun approach. And that doesn't help us much. The other thing that's interesting on this is, even if we concentrate on, and the reason I'm keeping this up on the screen is I want you to see the various capacities, even if we concentrate on fixing, quote unquote, fixing what's going on in station 3. Let's say there's a couple things that we're going to do. One of the things is we're going to, let's just say the simplest thing is to double the number of people who are working at this particular station. Theoretically now, the capacity of this station is 20. Now, if you double the capacity of the constraint, you do not double the throughput of the system, because you're just going to move to the next constraint in the system. In this case, we would go to the next constraint, which is station 4, which is 14. So by doubling what we do at station number 3, we don't double the throughput of the system. We only get a 40% increase in throughput of the system. And this is important to understand as well, because there's a lot of folks out there in the world of Agile who are promising a lot of things. And they're promising that you're going to get a huge increase in your rate of return in what you do by doing certain things. And the problem with that is that those things need to be more directed, and they need to have a better understanding of underlying systems in order to be most effective. And so what I've seen, and what seems to be a tendency, is that people will take this scattergun approach. The other thing that's interesting about a constraint in the system, which this comes to us from Ilya Goldratt, is that when you lose an hour or a day to the constraint, you lose an hour or a day to the entire system. And this, again, it's problematic. So the key with the constraint is that the folks who are at the constraint need to make sure that they're effective, focused, and on task. Because again, if not, if I improve, I can improve the first station by 1,000%. I am still not going to improve any input at all through the entire system. And this has huge, huge implications, as I say in my training, to your organization. It has huge implications in terms of finance. It has huge implications in terms of HR, who you hire, where you put them, how you focus them, who you train, who you spend your time on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just cascades throughout the entire organization. And the problem that I've seen, and I see Clement is in the green room, and I'm very anxious to bring him on here because he's actually shaking his head. Yes, I understand what you're saying, Larry, which is good. But I just want us to make sure that when we're looking at our systems, let's look at them as systems, and let's look at the overall throughput of the system, because you can often optimize pieces of the system or increase the throughput of pieces of the system at the expense of the system. So even though I've increased the productivity of parts of the system, the productivity of the entire system can actually go down as a result. And this, again, is something that's problematic. And it's something that I see over and over again. And I don't want you all to fall into that particular problem. So, as I said before, I have Clement here with me today, and thank you for joining us. It's Clement Kao. Thank you for joining us. Clement?
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you. I want to make sure your microphone was working, because
yeah,
it sounds like we got everything working. Listen, for those of you who don't, I'm assuming that there's some of you who know Clement, and for those of you who don't, and I've got a few minutes here, so hopefully I won't embarrass him too much. Clement is the founder and CEO of Product Teacher, which is a product management education company. And his company serves 3 different segments of product managers: aspiring product managers, where they're going to provide some courses to help you understand and break into product management. He's going to help the experienced PMs with career coaching, upskilling, et cetera, and also the leaders in the world of product management through group workshops and targeted training and other things. He's worked with tons of places you'll understand. You'll know the names: Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Airbnb, Zoom, et cetera. You and I, we worked at some of the same places. He is a PM instructor and PM coach, serving dozens of Fortune 500 companies. He's shipped 10 plus multi-million-dollar products at Blend and Movado, and he drove exits worth billions of dollars. That's very impressive. Wrote multiple books and essays on product management, totaling 300 plus publications, all kinds of other things. And the other thing that was really, really interesting to me, because we do something I think rather similar, he's very interested in social issues. So we talked when we were introduced about my nonprofit and the work that he's doing. He's interested in economic empowerment, educational inequality, gender inequality, racial inequality, mental health, and climate change. It's a ton of stuff, Clement. a ton of stuff. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got all of it. That was very impressive.
Well, you helped me out. If I didn't have notes, I don't know if I could remember all of that and present it. Is there anything, before we get into your quote unquote big idea, and I want to remind folks before we even get too far, that if you have questions or comments, please put them in the comments, because we can't see a whole lot of stuff that's going on, but we can see your comments, and we'd certainly love to be able to talk back to you if you do have some questions and comments, and I'm certain that you probably do. What are you working on? I didn't miss anything, but what are you working on? What are you excited about these days?
Yeah, fantastic question. So one of the things that actually I recently started noticing in a lot of the coaching that I was doing is a lot of product managers are currently trying to navigate this very interesting jobs landscape. I think a lot of folks realize that right now, even though the economy is getting a lot better, it's not necessarily easier to get an interview as a product manager. So one of the things that I've been actively working on is actually creating a quick guide on, hey, how do you actually navigate this PM jobs market? How do you actually get in front of the hiring manager, secure that interview, and to make it all the way through to that offer stage, right? So that's the thing that I'm working on right now. You can find all of that and all of my other stuff at productteacher.com. But yeah, just really want to make sure that I'm helping folks navigate this very VUCA environment, right? Kind of, it's getting harder and harder for people to stand out as product managers, and I really want to make sure that they succeed. So that's just what I've been really focused on these days.
That's excellent. So if I'm going to put you on the spot here real quick, if you had one or two real quick bits of advice for the people, because we know that a lot of us know that the job market is challenging now.
Yeah.
What would be the advice that you give to folks? So I'm sure there's some folks who probably are in that situation listening to us right now.
Yeah. So I think the number one thing that you want to remember, and this is going to sound really basic, but exactly like Larry was saying before, sometimes the basics are the most important thing. The hiring manager is a person. Why do I say that? The reason I say that is because when people are trying to hire folks, right, you got to think about what's happening to the hiring manager on the other side of the fence. They're currently getting something like, I don't know, 500 applications per week, right? And if I said, hey, why don't you go look at 500 tweets, right, and pick the best tweet in 500, you couldn't. And so it's the same thing with candidates, but even more critical, right? Just like you were saying for theory of constraints, they're trying to figure out what is the bottleneck I need to go solve. So they need to make sure they've got this really amazing hire. It's a lot, right? Just like looking at 500 resumes. And so the most important thing is thinking about, how do humans actually make decisions? And something that's really true is hiring managers as people, they rely a lot on the people around them to help out, right? And so that means that personal networking is actually one of the highest leverage things that you can do as you're looking for your next product management chapter, right? Really trying to think through, hey, for this particular hiring manager that I want to get their attention, who do they trust? Who do they rely on? Kind of how can I get them to advocate for me instead of just sending in all these applications to as many places as you can, right? So it's really all about the human connection. That's kind of like the one core piece of advice to all of the things that I'm putting out right now. So yeah.
I think that's great advice. And I think a lot of folks hopefully will keep that in mind as they're looking for work, because it really does come down to that. And I've often said that when you have this many resumes and this many people looking for work, what's going to put you in a place where you're going to be most successful? And that's having some kind of relationship with the company or the person or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So Clement is going to talk about today, empathy ignites success. And when we champion our customer success, they will champion ours. I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let him go ahead and do that. And I'll be back in a little bit. But I want to remind folks, if you have questions or comments, we'll get to them after Clement's presentation. But please put them in there so that we can get them queued up and ready to go. Thank you very much, Clement. Take it away.
For sure. Thanks so much. So again, this sounds very basic, right? But we really want to make sure that as we're thinking about how do we navigate this VUCA world, we really want to index towards how do we make our customers succeed, right? When we make our customers succeed, I think one of the things that people generally think about is, oh, I should definitely listen to the voice of the customer, right? Of course I should be doing these things. But what you might not realize is many times when you help someone succeed, they're actually very excited to help you succeed as well, right? It's actually in their best interest to make sure that you stick around and that you're doing well. And why is that? Think about it. When you're helping someone succeed, whether you've helped them get a promotion, whether you've helped them be able to earn more money, save on costs, etc., they want to make sure that you're still in business, right? Because if you're not in business, they're not going to be able to come back to you and continue to get that value to continue to keep their goals rolling, right? So every time you help someone else succeed, you've aligned their incentives to your incentives, because now they really want to see that you're doing well. They'll actually actively go and fight for you. And so it's not just, hey, if I make someone really happy, I'll get a testimonial and that's word of mouth. It's not that. It's when you really fight hard to help them succeed, they're going to put in a ton of effort that you may not expect to actually really help make sure that you're sticking around as well. Like, they really want you to be able to stick around for the long term. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through a couple of different examples just to be able to bring this to light. And the thing that I want you to keep in mind is when I say customer doesn't always mean, hey, an actual customer that you're selling to. Many times, right? Think about, let's say, I'm creating some sort of group event, right? Then all of the attendees are your customers, right? Whether that is for church or whether that is for, a friend group, or whether that is your manager, right? When you think about it, your manager is also a kind of customer of yours. They're really looking to go get problems solved, right? And so in all aspects of your life, think about who are my customers and how can I make them succeed? Because when I make them succeed, they really want to make sure that you succeed as well. So let's go ahead and jump into a couple of examples. So just speaking from my coaching background, one of the really gnarly scenarios that I unfortunately had to help someone navigate through is there was a particular product manager who was working through a really difficult situation with internal politics. Basically, they were in this particular situation where they were reporting to multiple different managers. So they were reporting to the IT group, they were reporting to the product group, but they were also reporting to the operations group. And each of these groups had very different agendas with very different views on the world. And so during that period of time, it was actually incredibly thrashy. They were bouncing back and forth between all of these different initiatives, and they were just basically losing their hair, right? It's a very, very difficult time for them. And so as I was coaching them through in terms of, what are the kind of rational things to do in building up empathy, making sure that you're ruthlessly prioritizing, making sure that you're aligning your stakeholders along this journey, one of the things that I noticed is that, yes, there's all of these rational things that we can do, set up these frameworks, etc. But we're all human, right? And we all feel emotions. And it was the emotional impact that was really draining them. And so, as a coach, it's not my job, right, to make sure that people are succeeding emotionally. But I really did want to make sure that they were hanging on okay, right? It's a really tough scenario, right? Kind of the job market is not amazing. And so it can feel like you're walking on glass a little bit. It just feels very uncertain. And so for this particular person, I really want to make sure that I stayed available to them as they were navigating through this very painful process where it's, hey, as you run into an emotional scenario, just text me, just call me, right? I'm here to make sure that you're able to make it through because I know that you've got all of the basics. I know that you've got all the frameworks that you need to succeed, but it's all about making sure that you're paying attention to your emotions as you're working through these really difficult challenges. And so thankfully, after about 6 months of kind of dancing through all of these challenges, they were able to wrangle things back into a much more stable state. And because of all of the really great work that they've done, they actually got promoted at the end of that period of time. And so because of that, one of the things that I honestly did not expect, right? This was not my goal. I didn't ask for it. They went and told me, hey, Clement, actually, one of the things that I did for you in the background is I've been fighting with our teams this entire time in terms of how do we bring you in as a coach, right? Kind of how can we have you actually teach all of our product managers because we would all benefit so much from your advice. I said, whoa, I didn't ask you to do that. You didn't need to do that. That's not like, what I'm here for. But they said, no, you really changed the trajectory of my career. And I could see how that's really helpful for the rest of our group. And so I've just been working with our HR team to make sure that we can actually get you in as a preferred vendor in terms of being able to coach the rest of our groups, not just in product, but also bring you into our engineering group, into our design group. And so, oh my gosh, like that is so generous of you. I didn't ask for that, but I'm honestly so appreciative, right? And I said, well, yeah, because you helped me through a really hard time. And so that's just one example of how when you really fight hard to make someone succeed, when you go above and beyond what people ask you for, right? That is a really great way for you to align their incentives to yours. And they really want to make sure that you're doing well as well, right? So of course, there's like a personal example there. So hopefully that's something for folks to resonate against. A different one, right, is one where, I think all of us have experienced on the job, which is your manager is a kind of customer, right? When you think about it, when your manager has hired you, they're really looking for you to solve their headaches, right? Or else they wouldn't be hiring you. And so if you really think about, well, what is it that my manager is struggling with, right? Like not just what am I tasked to do, what are my responsibilities, but what is it that my manager is currently doing and how do I make sure that they're not running into problems? Well, that's a really great way to set yourself up for success as well. So I want to rewind the clock a little bit. Back when I was working in real estate, I was working in a real estate brokerage as just a data analyst, right? So my formal title was data analyst, and that was really kind of the core point of my job. But even though that was what I was supposed to be doing, one of the things that I noticed was that for my manager, they had all of these additional challenges that were coming in because they had all of these different projects that were happening. And because in the past I had done a little bit of project management, I said, okay, well, given that there are so many different things going on, yes, I'm supposed to be the data analyst, but I'm also noticing that, there are all of these different threads that are going unresolved. We don't really have clear project plans. We don't really know the deadlines. We don't really know how to allocate resources correctly. Let me go and just spin up all of these different foundational pieces. So that way my manager isn't spending, weekends and late nights and early mornings trying to wrangle all of these different projects, right? So I really didn't want to see them struggling so much. And so because I'd gone in and kind of done all of this additional work around project management, which again, wasn't my title, right? That wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. Because I went above and beyond to really make sure that their initiatives were also on track, not just mine. One of the things that actually wound up happening is that I started getting a reputation around the office of, hey, if Clement happens to be on your team, you can be pretty sure that your project is going to succeed, right? Like you're not going to run into all these hiccups of, oh, there's a sudden deadline, or, oh, we forgot about these resources, or, oh, there's this risk. You should try to get Clement into your team was kind of like the word around the office, which was very flattering. And the thing is, back then as a data analyst, I didn't know that I wanted to be a product manager, right? Like I was just kind of thinking, hey, I'm going to be a data analyst for the next 4 to 5 years, right? I'm going to learn all of these things, really get really rigorous in terms of data analytics. That's totally fine. But what happened was my manager and their manager, they noticed, well, wait a second, if Clement's doing so well here and other companies hear about it, well, they're going to try to poach him, right? Like they're going to try to take him away from us, and we can't have that. And so what they actually wound up doing was they decided to promote me to being a software product manager because I had done all of this additional work and they knew that I could handle that work. And of course, they provided that, significant pay boost along with it. And I didn't ask for any of this, right? I said, I don't know why you're promoting me. I'm very happy just being the data analyst, right? Like that's the thing that you hired me for. I'm just going to do data analytics. And so, well, no, Clement, it's quite clear that you understand that there are all these different initiatives that are happening. There are all these different business projects that are happening. And you've pushed us to not just look at data, but also do customer interviews, right? Really understand customers. And so we're pretty clear that you're great at product management. Even if you've never done it before, you should be the product manager, right? And so like, that's what happened to me. I didn't ask for that title change. I didn't ask for that pay boost, but they gave that to me because I really made sure that they succeeded without them asking for it, right? And so I think just kind of tying up this entire big idea before we swap over to the Q&A section, really the most important thing is as you think about how do you want to move forward in the world, right? Kind of what are your objectives? What do you want? Flip the question instead, right? Think about how can I help other people get what they want? Because if I get other people what they want, then they're going to try to make sure that I get what I want, right? And so really you're aligning your incentives together where when you fight really hard to make other people succeed, they're going to fight just as hard to make sure that you succeed. Because again, if you don't succeed, right, just play it out. Let's say that, you're going to your favorite bakery and you find out one day that the bakery has closed, right? Oh my gosh, like I don't get to see anyone anymore. I don't get to be a part of that community. That would be devastating. And so that's why you keep telling your friends, you should check out this bakery. That's why you keep going to that bakery every day or every week because you don't want to see them fail. And the same principle applies to all of our work as well. People don't want to see you fail if you've helped them succeed because now their future success is at risk, right? For them to keep succeeding, they need to make sure that you've succeeded, right? And so that's a really great way to think about, as we talk about, what Larry was saying before, theory of constraints, think about what is the thing that is constraining your customers from succeeding? How do you help to break that constraint? If you really help them succeed, again, then they will really help to make sure that you are continuing to succeed as well. So yeah, so that is the big idea there. I'm sure that folks have a lot of questions for us. So very much looking forward to addressing your comments and questions.
Yeah, we have a few in the comments section, and we got. I'm going to go through and I'm going to curate some of these
Sure.
So we can talk to them. There's a lot about finding work these days, which again is top of mind. Andy, who's joined us many times before, it's good to see Andy. He says, look, we got the same problem for Scrum Master and Agile coach roles. It's hard to stand out and get an interview, even when extremely qualified and you have great references, et cetera. Again, talk a little bit more. We talked about it briefly, but What are you seeing these days? What do you think when somebody tells you that?
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that I really want to emphasize again is hiring managers are people who are making personal decisions. And so you really want to try to get into the mind of the hiring manager. Because something that I've seen too, right? Just like, again, transparently for the folks that I've coached, some of them come in with incredibly impressive references, right? They have amazing resumes. They easily are more experienced than I am, right? But they're still not getting interviews. And why is that? It's because they're spending all of this time doing what I would call unfocused work, right? Basically, hey, I'm going to be sharing on LinkedIn, hey, here's what I'm really good at in product management, or hey, here's some case study, or hey, here's a reference. But they're not really thinking about, well, what does it look like to the hiring manager, right? On the hiring manager side, when we think about what is their workflow is, okay, today I come into the office, I now have 300 resumes to look at, and I don't want to look at 300 resumes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask, hey, team, does anyone know someone that we can just, talk to? Can you vouch for anyone before I look at the stack of 300 resumes? And someone's going to say, oh yeah, I know Clement. You should go check out Clement. We've worked together in the past. You should at least reach out, right? So that hiring manager reaches out to Clement because someone vouched for Clement, and they don't even look at the stack of 300 resumes, right? And so the thing is, when you're looking at, how do I get through a particular channel? The better question to ask is, should I even go through this channel, right? I think a lot of times if you just go through the standard application process, a lot of times things get lost. And so instead, think about when I'm trying to access this particular company's network, who are the people that you're connected to, right? And kind of work your way through there of, hey, I've worked with some client before in the past, and that client has, given me these great references. We'll start with them instead as you kick off the next chapter. Right? Hey, do you happen to know any other customers who might need this work? Or do you happen to know anyone else who might benefit from someone like me, right? And so work through your points of strength instead of trying to go after openings where you don't have those immediate connections. And I think that can be a really helpful way to start to unlock your network and be able to open up these opportunities that you may not have been aware of before.
Yeah, and I'm just going to piggyback on that because I've got a little bit of experience working with the unemployed as well through my nonprofit. And one of the things I always say, which your response triggered in my head, is go with your strengths.
Totally.
Now, there's a lot of folks who say, "Oh, I want to change my whole career now that I have this break." And my advice is usually no. Take your strengths, go get something that you can find, quickly. Keep the lights on, keep the pressure off, then go look for your dream job, because it's a lot easier to look for your dream job when you already have a job than it is when you're not employed. Ian has a lot of comments. I just want to share one or two of them. And he says, "Look, I admire." This is Ian. He's also somebody that comes to us on a regular basis. So hello to Ian. He admires your enthusiasm. But, at the end of the day, empathy doesn't always guarantee you're going to keep your job. Corporations will fire anyone at any time. I think we've learned that. All of us have learned that. And then he talks about AI, which is one of his strengths. And I want to get into that too. But let's separate the two first before we talk about AI. Let's talk about the fact that in this world we live in, and I'm going to describe it as a VUCA world, we do see more layoffs. We do see less corporate loyalty to their employees. What's your advice to folks? We gave the advice to people who are looking for jobs who don't have one, but what's your advice to people who have jobs, not just to keep them, but to, if you happen to lose it, to weather it better? What do you do now if you still have a job?
Totally, yeah. So I actually want to even split that up into two separate threads, right? So the first thread that I want to tackle is, hey, what happens when you've put in all of this loyalty, right, into an organization and they get rid of you, right? I think a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, like I've wasted all of this time, right? Why did I spend all of this, effort building up this organization that doesn't want me anymore? But the thing you got to remember is organizations are made of people. And a lot of times the people around you have noticed that you've put in all of this work, right? And the great thing about people is they know other people and other people are hiring, right? And so many times, right, even though there might be, a division-wide layoff, which sometimes happens, right, and is very much unfortunate, a lot of times the people who are all laid off together, they know other people, right? And so they can help to vouch for you, and they can kind of unlock their networks as they're going through. And even for the people who are sticking around at the organization, right, there's this thing that we call survivor's guilt, which is, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I went by unscathed. Many times your former colleagues, right, who are still there, they want you to succeed because you put in all this work to help them succeed, right? So they're going to say, hey, well, Clement, I happen to know someone else, in this particular org that's hiring. Do you want me to connect you with them? Right? And so when you do put in that track record, right, then people are more than willing to open up their networks. The thing, though, is that they're not going to necessarily do that proactively, right? Sometimes you do have to go and ask them because everyone's busy, right? Like everyone's busy trying to make sure that they themselves are not getting fired, making sure that they're keeping the lights on for themselves. And so a lot of times it's, hey, I honestly really enjoyed working with you on XYZ project in the past. I remember that we got through these challenges together. Totally get that you're busy, but given that I just got laid off, would you happen to know anyone? And a lot of times they're going to have these immediate thoughts of, oh yeah, I know someone at Cisco, or oh, I know someone at Adobe, or I know someone at eBay, and they're going to connect you with these organizations and get the ball rolling there, right? So that's thread number one in terms of what happens if I put in all this loyalty, is it all wasted? And my short answer is no, because the people around you have seen that you've put in all that work, right? So that's part one. Part two is around, okay, I haven't been laid off yet, thank God. But I don't necessarily feel great about where I'm at. How do I continue to make sure that I'm in a safe spot, right? And again, the good thing is that all of us are people. And so all of us are experiencing the exact same problem right now. I will tell you, right, just in terms of the folks that I've coached, it's not just at startups, right? Even at very big companies, right? Product managers at Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, all of them are worried about layoffs, right? Even if their jobs are still secure. And so a lot of times you can actually go and reach out to other folks and say, hey, what are you currently doing about preventing being laid off, right? And kind of you can actually share your networks together, right? One of the pieces of advice I actually gave to one of my mentees is, hey, look, you're not the only one worried about this. Why don't you create a meetup, right? Go ahead and create a local meetup of everyone else who's also worried about this and just talk about how are you dealing with it, right? And some people will say, oh, I make sure that, I'm continuing to go on stage to talk. Other people will say, oh, well, I'm making sure I'm keeping my resume up to date and whatever. Then you share strategies together and building that bond. You'll also say, well, I also happen to know that someone else is hiring. You should go check that out, right? Kind of that jointly shared pool network is really powerful, right? So don't hesitate to draw on that. The great thing about VUCA is we're all going through VUCA together, right? And so as humans, we want to help each other succeed, right? So don't hesitate to reach out to other people because they're feeling exactly the same problem that you do. And you may not realize you've got all these strengths and networks and connections that they would benefit from. You just don't know it yet. And they also have a network that, they may not know they can help you with, right? So you want to reach out and, open up that networking opportunity to see, can we help each other continue to succeed in this very crazy and volatile world? So yeah.
Right. And one of the things when people, I talk to a lot of people as you do, because we're all in the same boat. And this is actually, you have some time when you don't have work. So you can catch up on these things and people that you don't have time to catch up on when you're working. But you don't want to forget it while you're working too. If you can keep those lines of communication and try to set aside some time to reach out to people. The other thing, and I want to get your thoughts on this. What I recommend to people is, if you can, try to make yourself into a brand. Totally. In the sense of, here, to the outside world, here is who I am. Here is what I do. I mean, obviously you've created a brand. I'm in the process of trying to create a brand. But I think that that's important as well, so that you are kind of top of mind for others, because you have some kind of standing in the community, and you've given, in a lot of cases, given back to the community. You talk about, creating a meetup or going to meetups or giving talks and things. Just want to, what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. Yeah. So I think in terms of branding is important, but you have to make sure that the brand has a very sharp point. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, you can't just go and say, hey, I happen to be an experienced product manager, because how are you different from everyone else, right? Instead, you want to say, hey, I have solved this particular pain before, right? So some examples of pains that I've solved before. How do you actually configure, right? Create all these different configurations for a SaaS product and manage them through that lifecycle, right? It's a very niche topic. Most people don't talk about it, but I talk about it, right? I know how to do this one particular thing. And if you happen to have problems, come find me, right? And because I have this free essay on how exactly to do that, companies reach out and they say, Clement, can you coach us on this? Because I need exactly that, right? And so What you don't want is you don't want to necessarily just be a brand where you're getting the word out. You want to provide solutions, right? Hey, here's the thing that I've solved before. Here's how you do it, right? And if you need it, come find me, right? Here's how I've solved this other thing. And if you need my help, come find me, right? Kind of putting out all these breadcrumbs of here's a problem that I've already solved for you. If you need me, come find me, right? That makes it a lot more likely that people will actually understand the value that you can bring to them and be very excited to have that conversation with you, right? I think a lot of times what I see is many times for early career product managers, what they'll do is they'll post some very generic posts on LinkedIn or X, formerly known as Twitter, or Reddit or whatever, in terms of, hey, here's why the thing that I'm doing is cool, right? Like, oh, here's some general best practices, but it's not pointed, right? It's not like here's a solution to someone's actual real problem. And because of that, it's really hard to remember that person when you're trying to hire, when you're trying to find a coach, when you're trying to do anything, right? It's just, that's not the first thing that someone thinks of. But when you have a very pointed solution and someone runs into that prompt, they're like, oh my God, this is so hard, I don't know what to do. They think of you immediately before anybody else, right? And so that's the more important part. It's not just a general brand. You want to make sure that there's a very pointed solution for a very particular problem. So then that way people think of you immediately when they run into that problem.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you do this, don't wait until you're unemployed to do this, right? When you're employed, take the time to learn new things, take the time to make sure you keep your network safe, take the time to do some branding work so that when things do turn around, they'll right now it's hard for everybody. I just saw where McKinsey is going to be laying off some people if they don't take severance. So it's tough all over. But when the economy turns around, and it will, I'm old enough to know that, then you're poised, hopefully, to join the next wave, which is the hiring wave that everybody's kind of waiting for. Real quick, we're almost out of time, but I did want to get your thoughts on AI because we do know it's changing things, and I know that Ian would be interested. I'm sure the rest of the folks would be interested. Talk about AI product management. What comes to mind? What do you think about AI? Where do you see it, intersecting with the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I like to think about AI is, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, is the way that I like to think about mobile, right? And so for folks who have been in the industry long enough, at some point in time, people were very excited about, hey, we need to have a mobile app because no one else has mobile apps. And it's really important that every product has a mobile app. And so people were hiring specifically for mobile product managers. I think this was back in maybe like 2014 to 2016. There were a lot of mobile product manager jobs out there. Today, when you actually look at what are the kinds of job postings out there, you don't see a mobile product manager anymore. And why is that? It's not because mobile isn't still important. It is really important, but it's because mobile is now just the default for every product, right? Like every product should be mobile responsive because you don't know when someone's going to be using your product on their phone, right? And so because of that, I think very much similarly, AI, for now, it's a separate category. Sure, there are AI product managers. But as we continue to evolve as like a product management industry, at some point, every product manager is an AI product manager, right? So if you think about, oh, I am, let's say, a platform product manager. Well, how do you make sure that other people can access your APIs if they're going to use AI to build their integrations, right? Well, you are now an AI PM that happens to be doing platform stuff. Or let's say that you're a growth product manager and you're trying to figure out how do I continue to drive these additional conversions? Well, you probably need to fiddle with AI to actually work through, here are all the different experimental options that we could tackle, or to be able to spin up, here are these different micro copies and experiences for people to work through as they work through the conversion funnel, right? And so everyone's going to be doing AI anyways, right? And so the way I would think about it is don't split it out as something different. It's just a part of product management. So that's how I think about it. Just exactly like how mobile is just standard product now. AI is going to become standard product in the future. So yeah.
So we've got about a minute left.
Sure.
All the things. If you again, let's talk about a bit of advice. If you had a bit of advice for the folks who are here about what's going on in today's world, what's the thing that's most top of mind for you?
Yeah, the most top of mind thing is instead of saying, "How can I find a job?" think instead, how can I help someone else succeed, right? Basically, who's got a problem and how can I help them? Even if it's not a job, even if it's a consulting opportunity, even if it's volunteer or nonprofit or whatever, just think about how do I help someone succeed, right? Like really make your thoughts around helping others because they're gonna help you, right? Like when you've helped other people succeed, They don't want to see you fail because they're going to fail if you fail, right? And so I'd say that's the one most important thing for my own career, honestly, in terms of making sure that I know what I'm doing next is all about who's got a problem and how do I solve that problem for them. And by doing that, doors open magically and you don't even know that they've opened, right? And so I'd say that that's really kind of the core piece of advice as people are navigating promotions, title changes, function changes, new jobs, all of these things, they all belong in the category of how do I help the other person succeed? Because once they succeed, they want to make sure that you're in the business. So yeah.
That's great. I appreciate it, Clement. Thank you so much. We certainly could talk about this all day, but we do want to be respectful of people's time. So that's it for a session of Relentless Learning. I want to thank Clement, my guest. I want to thank the folks who have joined us and the regulars who join us every Friday. We're here most Fridays. I didn't show next week's because I'm still working on a guest for next week. So hopefully we'll be able to get that guest. I'm trying to get Kyle to join us. I don't know if he's listening now. I just want to remind folks that we are here most weeks. So please join us. Please, if you like it, tell your friends, bring them along. I think it's a good way to spend a Friday around lunchtime, at least in the Pacific time zone. So everybody have a wonderful Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so very much. We'll see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Bye.